Time now for Talking Points with Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA. Well, Charlie, it's back to school time, and a new school year is upon us. Millions of kids are heading to universities for the very first time. Given how nakedly political and ideological campus has become, what advice can you give to students about how to survive politically and morally on a college campus these days?
Well, you pointed out the right word. It's about survival. Our campuses have become total and complete centers of indoctrination and intolerance. So my advice is always to hear ideas that you disagree with, but also make sure that you are rooted in the timeless ideas of freedom, smaller government, individual initiative, natural rights, self-governance, so on and so forth. But what's so interesting is that these ideas are not necessarily even being taught from an opposition perspective. They're not being taught at all in our universities. And this is something you and I know is so important, and the project that you're doing is so important. Because if young people are not exposed to these ideas from a young age, then they're going to automatically think they don't exist. And then when they are presented with them, they'll say, oh, there's no way, I didn't learn that in school. There's no way that can't be possibly true. And you and I know that some of the best ideas are actually not being taught in our schools.
You know, to me, as a 25-year university professor, I'm getting ready to start campus again as well. And throughout the humanities, people want to discount the humanities. They want to focus on STEM and the hard sciences. Here's the problem. What goes on in these kids' 2 years of gen ed courses, that's what's going to color them politically. And all the reading strategies, all the way we make kids read books in universities, Marxism, feminism, queer theory, environmentalism. How did we get to the point, Charlie, where the only way kids are allowed to read books, even good books, is through these radically politically leftist activist lenses?
Well, we sacrificed the universities to very, very far left influences, Marxist influences that do not love America, and they're generally very dissatisfied individuals of the status quo of America. So you and I were very thankful we live in America. These people are angry that we live in America, and they're trying to teach this sort of anger and hostility upon a generation that unfortunately does not know any better. And then they also simultaneously try to paint the false promise and the false appearance and aberration of utopianism. You pair all these things together, you got a lot of problems. And what I'm most concerned about, what I'm most worried about, is that young people are falling for the trap and the false song of Marxism. And you can see, the track record of the last 100 years. It hasn't been successful in the least. It's been actually catastrophic on every single level.
You know, if you think about all the things that I listed, things like feminism, things like environmentalism, how it's creeping into schools, these are really just following the Marxist playbook. I don't know that many kids have the history anymore to understand that all of these activist readings, they ultimately do go back to Marxism, and they are promoting socialism. As somebody who is on campus a lot like me, your organization, Turning Point, and that's the first place maybe we should start. Any kids watching this today, get involved with those really good organizations on campus that aren't Marxist, like Turning Point. I mean, you guys are dedicated to teaching primary capitalist free market economics. Talk a little bit, first of all, about when kids go to campus, how can they hook up with Turning Point, and what would they expect if they were able to join a local Turning Point section?
So yeah, they can go to our website, tpusa.com, and they can email one of our many, many field directors to get engaged, get involved, and start a chapter on campus. And look, we try to be the counterbalance against the aggressive Marxist teaching that happens in our universities. And you and I both know that if we do not get our viewpoint out, we are going to have a generation of socialists and communists and Marxists. And I don't say those words lightly, because it's very, very true, that will be dedicated to the fundamental destruction of the greatest country ever to exist. And I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm not going to sit idly by while we watch this republic and this beautiful country deteriorate from within. And so we want every young person watching this to get engaged and involved with Turning Point USA, tpusa.com. And our staff would love to work with you. We have amazing events. We have wonderful training programs. And look, this is the battle for the soul of this country. I have a book coming out in a couple weeks, Campus Battlefield, talking about how conservatives can actually win again on college campuses, something that I'm very, very proud of. So this is a very exciting time to be involved in this fight, but equally as consequential as it is exciting.
What kind of pushback, as you've been monitoring TPUSA organizations, what kind of pushback do they usually encounter from schools? What kinds of flies do they try to stick in the ointment of kids organizing this way?
So yeah, I mean, there's an unbelievable amount of pushback that we receive from the administration, from students, from activists. But we relish in the fight. We don't try to play the victim. We don't try to say, oh, poor us, we're being fought back against. Instead we stand our ground, and we stand for what we believe in, and then we look we look assertively towards our student leaders to be able to plant the flag and realize they're probably not going to win some of these fights. But if you can win converts over, and you can win hundreds of other students, if not thousands of other students over, that's worth all the effort that you can put into it. And look, this is a culture war. This is not a political war. Politics are downstream from culture. It's so important to realize that. I like to say these universities have become islands of totalitarianism, where free speech, dialogue, discourse, they're not present whatsoever. And where if we are going to sacrifice the entire terrain of higher education to far left-wing Marxist radicals, we will soon have a country that is unrecognizable.
Where would you send kids in this culture? Because they're not going to get real good economic, real good history at college campuses. It's all going to be biased. Where would you send them to try to find sources that will balance out, like you say, Turning Point is a counterbalance? Where else in the culture would you send them?
I'd send them to you at the Freedom Project, and the work that you're doing. But also, I would also tell them, look, go to Prager University. I don't like the big institutional, bureaucratic, educational monoliths. Instead, I'm actually a big believer in autodidactic learning, which is self-taught learning. Go after the greatest books in human history. Just sit down and read Montesquieu and Thomas Aquinas and Plato and Aristotle and Socrates. And then all of a sudden you can get a better understanding of the foundational ideas that created, free society, Western civilization, the idea of a republic, and then finally the inspiration of the greatest country ever to exist. But here's the question is, since you and I believe so, we're so firmly committed in these ideas, why is the left so afraid to have our viewpoints represented on these campuses? And my opinion would be they're actually afraid because they know that when our ideas are given a platform and to be heard, that they start losing and we start winning converts. And so instead of trying to prove us wrong, they try to shut us up. And there's something fundamentally evil about trying to silence opposition just because you disagree with them.
Yeah, and my experience is exactly that, Charlie. 25 years ago when I started teaching college, back then they at least would present both sides. They would let the kids read a book, and then they would try to sway the kids' opinion of a book. But here's the problem. When you put the great books of the Western classics in front of kids, and then the professor's politics, 99 times out of 100, kids chose the books, they didn't choose the politics. And what's changed for me in 25 years, now they won't even let kids understand books as books. Before you even read Aquinas or you even read Montesquieu, they've already started with this indoctrination that this is Marxism, this is sexist, racist, homophobic American history. So even when kids get good books put in front of them now, it's overridden by the ideology and the politics.
That's right, yes. And so it's a revisionist history of even the great classical works. And this is why what you're doing is so important, and we need more people just to teach history, not how you want it to be, but how it was, but also the core elements and the hero's journey of the American experience. America is the greatest country ever to exist, not just because of what we've accomplished, but what we've overcome and how we've dealt with the improper actions of the past. I mean, if you look at why America is the only country ever to exist to send its own citizens to die for the freedoms of others. I mean, think about that. We're the only country, we're the most benevolent, the most generous, the most creative, the most forward-thinking country ever. Yet you walk into a university lecture hall, they say, well, Charlie, we're a racist, bigoted, homophobic country, founded illegally, stealing the lands of indigenous people. I'm like, what are you talking about? That is such a misinterpretation and such a disservice to the actual American experience and story. And so it's up to people like you and I to continue to do our work so that we can accurately educate and teach the next generation how thankful they should be to live in America and to live in Western civilization, what a free society means, and what they as an individual can do to participate and thrive in such a society.
Charlie, before I let you go, one last thing. Our high school kids, are feeling the radical pressure to go to college, to get tens of thousands of dollars in debt, even when many of them don't need it or don't need it right away. And they don't need it to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, maybe a shout out. Let kids know that if college isn't for them or if it's not the right time, that it's better to do something else, maybe get a job, save some money, before putting yourself in debt. College is not something that everybody has to have, and they don't have to have it when they're 18 years old.
That's correct, yes. So we ask our high school seniors, where are you going to college, not why are you going to college. Every other major consumer decision we make throughout our life, we weigh the cost, the benefit, the analysis, except college. College decisions are determined on such superfluous, silly, just like reasons. I guess that's the right word. Oh, I like that fraternity. I like the sports team. It's close to home. My parents want me to go there. College should not be based on any of those things. It should be based on, is it worth me assuming debt so that I could learn something that will actually make me better prepared or more likely to be employed for something that I care about and that I'll want to do for the rest of my life? And a perfectly acceptable answer to that is, I don't know what I want to do with my life. That's okay. That's fine. Then take a year off. Go do a gap year. Work. Go do an internship. Ask someone who might be in a field you enjoy to spend a couple months with them and just volunteer. Use your early years, your formative years, not to assume debt, not to get yourself in a terrible financial circumstance, but to do what you enjoy, to assume skills, experiences, connections that might make you more likely to be employed, but at least you can figure out what you don't want to do. And that's not what college should be. College should not be a place where you go and you experience a lot of different things and you're trying to try things out. No, it's way too expensive for that. That's a complete and total waste of time. College should be about career preparation, not life exploration.
Charlie, fantastic words. I'll say this. The fact that universities are willing to accept more and more kids who are intellectually and academically unprepared, let those kids get $100,000 in debt and graduate them with degrees in areas that they cannot possibly get a job, that's the first lesson that I know Turning Point wants to teach these kids. This is how universities are anti-free markets, and this is how ultimately universities are working against our kids.
That's correct. That's exactly right. And you and I are both part of the solution, and we're going to win.
Charlie, thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you again next week.